Hi, Mr. Natural from Mr. Natural's Music School in San Francisco. Welcome back. We're continuing our lessons in harmony. Last time I showed you how these numbers come from this wheel, which I call the circle of thirds. And the circle of thirds, or thirds, spell every chord known to mankind. We'll show you how to add more notes to extend these to 4-note chords, 5-note chords, 6-note chords, etc. later. The other thing that I want you to know about the circle of thirds is a lot of people talk about the circle of fifths, the circle of fifths, and they try different ways of explaining it to you. Well, guess what? If you skip a third, you're skipping in fifths. So if I were to start here at the number 1, skip over this skip to here, I would be going from 1 to 5, and that would be the circle of fifths. If I skip from 5 over the 7 to 2, I am going to a 2 chord. If I skip from a 2 over to the 6, I have a 6. If I skip from the 6 over to 3, from 3 I can skip to 7, 7 to 4, and then 4 comes right back to 1. And what we have there is the circle of fifths. Another thing is chord progressions in the entire history of music writing is in this little circle. If we start here with the number 4 and build a 4 chord, which would be 4, 6, 1, I can move that 4 chord back to a 7 chord. The 7 chord can be moved back to a 3 chord. The 3 chord can be moved back to a 6 chord. The 6 chord to a 2 chord, the 2 to a 5, and the 5 to a 1 chord. Now, in music theory, people started with 1 chord songs. Then they played 1 and 5, and 1 and 5, and 1 and 5. Later on in history, people decided to turn the wheel in the other direction and go from 1 to 5, and 1 down to 4, and 1 to 5, and 1 to 4. And a lot of chord progressions were just skipping from a 1 chord down to a 4 chord, back to a 1 chord, up to the 5 chord, and back. And that kind of skipping around happened later on in history. Later on in history, when people wanted to add a 3rd chord, they would just skip in one direction twice and add the 2 chord. So 1, 4, 5, and 2 chord progressions began coming into music. Later on, as people's ears become more sophisticated, they added a 6 chord into the mix. So going from a 6 to a 2 to a 5 to a 1 to a 4 to a 1 to a 5 back to a 1 became common practice. And naturally, when we start getting into the 19th and 20th century, 3 chords became quite common in song progressions, and going from a 3 chord to a 6 chord to a 2 to a 5 to a 1 became very common. In jazz, 2, 5, 1, 2, 5, 1 is very common. And just going 2, 5, 2, 5, moving to another location and going 2, 5, 2, 5, and moving into another location, going 2, 5, 2, 5, 1 is the most common chord progression in jazz. But it's usually done with 4-note chords. So now what I want to show you in this video is how can I take these natural defaults and alter them. The most common thing is to change a major chord to a minor chord. And the way we do that, let's take the 1 chord here, which is a major chord. The note that's in the middle is called the 3rd. And in order to make a major chord small, we have to crush the 3rd. So if I take this and flatten, put a flat on that 3rd, this major chord will now become a minor chord and sound just like the 2 chord or the 3 chord. If I take the 4 chord and crush the 6 by making it smaller, I will diminish this down and making it also a minor chord. And if I take the 5 chord and flatten the 7 like that, I have now made this major chord a minor, I've made this major chord a minor, and I've made this major chord a minor. I've altered the chord by altering the natural spelling. Now I can do it in the opposite direction, right? I can take a minor chord and make that 3rd, which is naturally small, bigger by adding a sharp. So let's take the 2 here. This 2 minor can be made a 2 major chord by simply putting a sharp in front of the 4. So 2 sharp 4 6 would now be a major chord. The 3 chord can be made major by taking the 3, the 5, the 7, rising the 5 up with a sharp in front of it, like that. And now this is a major chord. I can take this 6 chord, put a sharp in front of the 1 here, and now I've raised this up and made this into a major chord. So I've taken the minor chords here, the major chords, and made them smaller by lowering the middle note. And I've taken the minor chords here and raised them up by raising this chord. Now the thing about the diminished chord is the first third is naturally small, but the second third is also naturally too small, which makes it squashed down or smaller than minor, diminished. So in order to make that one a major chord, I would have to raise 2 notes. I would have to raise the note in the middle, making it a big third, and I'd have to raise this up, making it a big third as well. So by adding a sharp to the 2 and a sharp to the 4, I can turn this diminished chord into a major chord. So it's possible to play leave the major, make that major, make that major, leave the major, make that major, make that major, or make this minor, leave the minor, make that minor, leave the minor, change this here to make this a minor, and I can play all minor chords. So by starting with its natural default condition and just changing the middle note in most cases, leaving out the 7th chord here, I can alter this to any major, any minor chord I want. And that's what happens when we're reading music. We start with the natural numbering of the chord. We start with whether it's a major or a minor, and if they ask for a 2 major chord, we raise. If they ask for a 4 minor chord, we lower the 3rd. So now I'm going to demonstrate that for you on the piano. Now what we're going to do is come over to the keyboard, come on in close so you can see the intervalometer here, and we're going to take this natural default in the key of C and show you how I can turn these into either major or minor chords at will. The first chord, 1, 3, and 5, is naturally a major chord. If I want to make that a minor chord, I take this 3rd note and flatten it. And now I've made it a sad minor chord. Major, minor. I can take the 4 chord, flatten the 3rd, and now it's minor. I can take the 5, which is naturally major, add the flat to the 7. 5, 7 flat 2 is now minor. So 1, 3, 5, 1 flat 3, 5, minor. 4, 6, 1, 4 flat 6, 1, minor. 5, 7, 2, 5 flat 7, 2, minor. So now I've altered all of the majors, the 1, 4, and 5, to minor chords. Now let's do the opposite with the 2s, 3s, and 6s. If I take the 2 chord, 2, 4, 6, it's naturally minor, which means this part here is too small. I need to make it bigger by moving up or adding a sharp to this middle note. So by raising this up here, 2, 4 sharp 6, I now have a major chord just like this. I can take this 3 chord, which is naturally minor, add a sharp to the 5, and now make it major. Now it's a major 3. We saw how we could make the major 4 minor, the 5 minor. Now I'm going to take the natural minor 6 chord, and by adding a sharp to the 1, make it major. Here on the diminished chord, this is too small and that's too small. So in order to make this a minor chord, the first thing I have to do is raise the 5 here to this. And then to make it a major chord, I have to raise the middle note up and add a sharp to this. So the diminished chord, we raise the 5, now it's minor. We raise the 3rd, and now it's major. Now what I'm going to do is use that to play all major chords all the way across. This one is normally major, so I'll play it as it is. This one's minor, so I'll raise it. This one's minor, so I'll raise it. This one's major, leave it alone. This one's major, leave it alone. This one's minor, raise it. And this one is diminished, raise the third and the fifth. And then I'm right back. Now I just played a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 major chord. Now I'm going to do the opposite. I'm going to take the major chord and make it minor and play all minor chords. Lower the third. Leave the 2 alone. Leave the 3 alone. Lower the third on the 4 chord. Lower the 5 chord, the 7. Leave it alone. And on this one I only need to raise this 5 here. So now I played minor chord, minor chord, minor chord, minor chord, natural minor, altered to minor. Now I just played minor chords on all of those positions. Now the next thing I want to show you is this would be true no matter where I move the slider. Just as when I move the slider over here, this was a major 1 chord. By lowering that note, this is now a minor 1 chord. Just as the 2, 4, 6 is minor, by raising the 4 to a sharp, it's now major. The 3 is naturally minor. If I raise the 5 to a sharp, it's now major. If I take the 4 chord and lower the middle note, I've made it minor. If I take the 5, 7, 2 and lower this note, I've made it minor. And if I take the 6 chord, naturally minor, and raise this up, I have a major chord. And if I take the diminished chord and raise both these, I have a major chord, or leave this one and I have a minor chord. So you can see major, minor, minor, major, minor, major, major, minor, major, minor, naturally minor, major, naturally diminished, minor, major. And I can do this in any key. Let's try one more over here. Naturally major, make it minor. 2, 4, 6, naturally minor, make it major. The 3 chord is minor, raise the 5. Now it's major. Take the 4 chord, naturally major, lower the 6. It's minor. Take the 5, major, lower the 7. I've made it minor. Take the 6, normally minor, raise the 1. I've made it major. Diminished, raise the 5th, the number 4, add a sharp. Minor, sharp 2, sharp 4, it's major. So as you see in any key, these formulas and these number codes remain constant. So remember, the natural default is to go around that circle, and what you need to do is memorize that circle like this. 1, 3, 5, 7, 2, 4, 6, 1, 3, 5, 7, 2, 4, 6, 1, 2, 5, 7, 2, 4, 5, and you have to turn it backwards to spell coming down. 1, 6, 4, 2, 7, 5, 3, 1, 2, 4, 1, 6, 4, 2, 7, 5, 3, 1, 3, 6, 4, 2, 7, 5, 3, 1, 6, 4, 2, 7, 5, 3, 1, 6, 4, 2, 7, 5, 3, and if you can rotate that pattern of circles of thirds backwards, or rotate that pattern forward, and then know what the normal spelling default is. 1, 4, and 5, always major. Lower the third to make them minor chords. 2, 3, and 6, always minor. Raise the third to make them major. You'll be able to alter any chord in any key to any chord you want. Now, doing this with 4-note chords adds in a 7th. We call that a 7th, either a major 7th or a minor 7th, and gives us jazz chords. And when you play jazz, they use all 4-note chord structure. So we're going to learn the same thing, these same patterns with the 4-note chords. We're going to learn what the natural default is, Then we're going to learn how to respell them. And then in the end, we're going to come to a piece of music, just spell everything with the numbers 1, 3, 5, 7. And then say, oh, look, it wants a natural major here, leave it alone. 3, 5, 7, 2. Oh, look, it doesn't want a minor, it wants a major. Raise the 5. Oh, it wants a major with a sharp or raised seventh. Raise the 2 on the number as well. So what we'll do is we'll start with the default states, which are just the numbers on that wheel, and then adjust either the 3rd or the 7th to create any chord we want. And then that can be translated into any key you want. See you next time.